You're listening to Drinks and a Movie with your host, Rudy. Spoiler alert.
All right, here we go. Drinks and a Movie podcast. Everybody, thank you for joining. In this episode, I'm going to be joined by Jocelyne, my friend Jocelyne. She did a couple of horror movie episodes with Carissa and I, and we're going to be talking about Mario Bava's 1960 film, Black Sunday. We did the recording over Zoom quite a while ago. This was back in December, and I'm just now putting it out. So it's been a couple months, so you're going to hear us talk a lot about Nosferatu. She really had a lot to say about it. So, I guess at this point, it's a little dated now that the movie's been out for a while, but it's all good. So we're talking Mario Bava's Black Sunday and Nosferatu. We didn't drink since we did it over Zoom. So I'm going to do this review right now in a separate recording. Oh, here we go. All right. So I'm going to be trying out the Jack Daniels 10-year. So 10-year-old age-stated Jack Daniels coming in at 97 proof. This one is batch 3. Okay. So I know that actually as of this week, like earlier this week, they had just released the Jack Daniels 14-year. Which I really hope I can get my hands on. Let me let this open up a little bit. I imagine it's going to be pretty tough, though. As tough as Coy Hill is to get. And even the 10 and 12 took me a while to finally get my hands on them. But now the new Jack Daniels 14 is out, batch 1, getting rave reviews. And they also released batch 4 of the JD10. So this isn't the most recent one. Again, the one I'm going to be talking about right now is batch 3, if that matters to you. And they also released, I think it was batch 2 or batch 3 of Jack Daniels 12 years. So yeah, anyway, so that's kind of where we're at in this world. Again, right now I'm going to review the Jack Daniels 10-year-old batch 3. I was just getting my palate acclimated with Jack Daniels Bonded, so I've been kind of warming up with that, which is a one that's really worth trying. I mean, it's a 700 milliliter bottle. You can get it for, I want to say, like $25. If you haven't tried it yet and you're looking for like another kind of budget drinking option, I think it's pretty good. It's what I feel like Jack Daniels should just always be. But I get it. They're one of the biggest selling whiskeys in the world. If not the biggest, they might still be number 1 with, the old number 7. But if you want to step it up and start sipping it and everything, then Jack Daniels Bonded is a good way to go. But yeah, so here's the 10. Of course, I would pick a night where I'm like really struggling to nose anything. So it's pretty subtle and sweet. It's mellow. I get the classic banana note, but this reminds me of kind of how I felt about the first Coy Hill they did, where you get that banana note, but it's more refined. It's not like an artificial candy banana. You get almost like a banana bread, like more, I guess, like real type of aroma with some brown sugar, which is really nice. It's definitely sweet. I definitely get a hint of the oak, like a very sweet hint of sweet oak, I always say. For me right now on the nose, and again, I'm having a little bit of trouble. I'm like a little sniffly right now. It's all just pretty sweet. Yeah, so it's like classic kind of Jack Daniels flavor and nose, but just elevated, if that makes sense in terms of its sweetness and its quality. Well, I'm gonna go in for the sip. Here we go. I'm gonna do sip number 2. Yeah, I'd say for the most part, the palate matches the nose, but now there's a little more of a spice kick coming through. I almost want to say like a black pepper, a little bit of like a bitterness. It's still smooth and easy going down. The finish for me right now isn't too long. And it's funny, doing it, right after the bonded, it doesn't come across more viscous like I would have thought. It almost for me right now has kind of a light, like a very light texture to it. Yeah, I can't help it. I'm getting a lot of the spice, some bitterness now, even more than before. Less of the sweet notes coming back. It sucks, man. I guess I picked a bad night to do this. But less of that sweetness coming through. Yeah, it's interesting. Like right now, it's not that great to me, but this is one, and I should have maybe just saved this, but I've really got to get this recording done. Because even when I was having the bonded tonight, I don't know if it's something I ate earlier or what, but even that didn't taste as great as it normally does to me. And this is kind of similar, but it always, I've had Jack Daniels 10 a few times, all 3, different batches that are out. So, the 3 batches that were out up to this point. And I mean, I like them for the most part, but it is inconsistent with me. Like some days they really hit well, other days not so much. So I feel like tonight is one of those days where it's not hitting as well, especially as I get deeper into it. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely, you get a sense of that maturity over the bonded version for sure. That oak's really coming through. But yeah, not so much of the sweetness that I would have liked and typically come to expect from Jack Daniels. I feel like that's the products I like from them typically are on that sweeter side. Even the barrel proofs, you know, they have like a nice sweetness to them, like despite the high proof. And yeah, right now this one isn't really a hitter for me. But again, like I said, it's inconsistent. Some days I have it and it's just wonderful. Right now is just not it. It's not quite landing for me, but it is worth trying. If you haven't tried it yet, I think if you ever see it at a bar, go for it. If you're into JD, well, if you're into Jack Daniels, you probably have already tried it. But if not, give it a try. Even if you're not into Jack Daniels for, you know, whatever reason, you just don't like what they do, give it a shot. If you see it somewhere, it's worth checking out. You know, if you're a bourbon head, Tennessee whiskey head, definitely give it a try. But yeah, I'll leave it at that for this one so that we can get into the movie. And yeah, pretty soon I also have Jack Daniels 12. So I'll be reviewing that in another episode. And maybe I'll do them both side by side just on another day when I'm feeling a little better about my tasting. But yeah. Anyway, let's get into the episode. Cheers.
Horror, anguish, and terror are powerful words, but more than words, the chill language of living images shows that the Mask of Satan is a picture of unparalleled emotion. It holds a tale of a strange, dark fascination set in a spine-chilling atmosphere of fear.
It's death! I've just seen death! She's breathing. We're in the presence of some unnatural mystery. Your father. My blood is no longer your blood. The spirits of evil have rendered that tie between us forever, and an accursed poison flows in your veins.
Suspense and the unexpected combine to create an impression beyond any imagination of an indescribable fantasy coupled with an unmentionable reality.
But it's impossible, Father. He moved, he even spoke to me. Then he ran away.
Sometimes Satan, with his capacity for doing evil, even plays tricks with the dead.
Hey, what's up, everyone? Thanks for tuning in to Drinks and Movie Podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jocelyne, who you might remember from the... What would we do so far? Black Christmas, 2006, Christmas Evil.
Well, we started with Planet Terror, I think.
Oh, Thanksgiving.
Oh, Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Yes. And then, Black Christmas. And then, Christmas Evil. Yes.
Dope.
And I think those are the handful we've done.
Yeah. So thanks for joining me and being a guest again.
Course.
Today, we're going to talk about Mario Bava's Black Sunday from 1960, starring Barbara Steele. So this is a movie that I saw maybe a year or two ago, but this was actually your pick. And I am a quite the Mario Bava fan. I haven't seen all his movies because, like many directors,
I know who you've been talking about, because I feel like you referenced him a couple of times, and I was just like, ephemeral name of a Italian director, horror director. I don't know. And now I'm like, oh, I get it. I get it.
Well, he's cool because he, besides being a director, he's also a cinematographer. So he shot like all his movies himself. And I mean, his lighting and just his atmosphere and all that is great. Like this is possibly one of the best looking like black and white movies. It's definitely in that pantheon for sure. But So I mean, I guess let me drop the synopsis first, and then we'll get into, I guess, what made you watch it, because you actually brought this up.
That's a good
So
question, actually.
so right after, or sorry, just right off of IMDb here. So decades after being executed for witchcraft, vengeful Princess Asa Vajda and her fiendish servant are resurrected and begin a bloody campaign to possess the body of Asa Vajda's beautiful lookalike descendant, Princess Katia?
Katya.
Katia?
Katya.
Yeah, I
It
already
sounds kind of
forgot.
like Natya, but Katya.
Yeah, I mean, so what got you to see this recently?
That's such a good question because I was like, I hope I can explain myself. Um, so I had seen, and I still have Nosferatu 2024 on my mind, Robert
Mm.
Eggers, and I will be, just candid. Like I was so excited for it, and I'm still very like entranced by it, enthralled by it because, it has all the gothic aesthetic that I love and everything. But there was a lot that I felt like it promised, at least in my head, that I did not get. And yeah, I mean, I read tons of Reddit threads about like the varying views on it. And we're not here to discuss Nosferatu, but that is why I was like trying to, I had a lot of like comments saying like, oh, well, people just don't get gothic horror. And I'm like, what? Like, so I didn't, it's not that I didn't like it. And I do want to watch it maybe a second time, whether that's in theaters or not. But yeah, I do want to see it again. And, my husband already Ian kind of warned me, or he didn't warn me. He was just saying like, he's been saying this for years that vampires are really disgusting and blah, blah, blah. And I was just saying to him, like, I think part of it was just like I had such a hard time suspending my disbelief that this like young maiden would fall in love with this guy because he's like so like repulsive. And he's like, but that's the thing, that's the horror of it. And it's like, that's true. I guess it is just like, again, I had such a hard time suspending my disbelief.
Well, did she fall in love with him, or
She
did
didn't.
she
That's the
just
thing. She was a
just
thrall.
understood? Yeah, that okay. I'm the
Yeah.
only one
So yeah,
that can
that's
stop
true.
it. I have to sacrifice myself.
That is a distinction. I did correct myself when I was just talking to him. I'm like, well, not fall in love with, but like she was a thrall of his. He like did vampire hypnosis and
Right.
everything. So exactly, good point. And then she realized that and was out of it, but she's like, well, if yeah, and I guess I am fair maiden. It said maiden has to. So yeah, I mean there's a lot to unwrap about that, and yeah, I won't go too much into it. But I think and I mean I feel like there is plenty of people also who appreciate and like gothic horror that were like, yeah, no, there was definitely his strong suit is atmosphere and a few other things, story and character development. As much as he did flesh out the characters, is not exactly why you go to an Eggers film, and that's not his focus as much. But anyway, it left something to be desired. And I'm not saying these films necessarily and like Black Sunday necessarily fills it. I mean, there's aspects I think it does, and we'll get into that. But so it's my birthday. I watched this on my birthday. I was stricken with COVID. Due to
Shit,
faults
bro.
not of my own. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, and I don't usually have a very like social birthday. I like to keep it low key just so I have less people to worry about. I just can worry about myself. But so I was like, I want to watch something that fills that void that maybe, and also to test myself. I'm like, maybe, I mean, even though I'm a goth, do I not like gothic horror? Which I highly doubt because I mean, I read all sorts of like horror short stories that are gothic horror, and I'm like, I love these. So what do you like? People are like, oh, the people just don't understand gothic horror. So, and also I've been craving like some I mean, this wasn't Hammer horror, but I wanted to like understand Hammer horror better, which I now understand is just it's a British studio basically that did all these, kind of, you could say campy, but whatever, gothic horror films in the 60s, maybe late 50s.
Yeah,
Something
yeah.
like
And
that.
I think
Yeah.
like late 50s. And I mean, like against in simple terms for someone who might not be familiar with it, like they essentially went and remade like the Universal classics.
Yes.
Like they did Dracula, they did a whole series of Dracula movies, a whole series of, Frankenstein. They did the Mummy, like all the same kind. I mean, there was a lot more movies, but they took kind of those heavy hitter concepts,
like all those like
did their
Dracula's
own.
Revenge, or I don't even know. They just
Yeah.
like would come up with tons of sequels and stuff. And there's a ton on Tubi. And so like basically I went down this rabbit hole where first I watched because I do like Vincent Price, and I think this was the day before my birthday, and I was sick and not feeling good. I watched a Vincent Price film I hadn't seen called The Haunted Palace, which apparently in the thing, the opening, it says it's based off an Edgar Allan Poe poem, which it is, but also H.P. Lovecraft. And I was like, wait, so is there a story that maybe, because I know H.P. Lovecraft as an author we're getting all over the place here. So sorry. It's like a rabbit hole I went down. But H.P. Lovecraft, Cthulhu mythos and everything, he was very inspired by Edgar Allan Poe. So I was like, okay, that seems feasible. I looked into it. Actually, what happened was the American, I think international film, AIF or something like that Vincent Price was attached to making this, wanted to ride the wave of some successful Edgar Allan Poe films they had right around the Hammer horror time, but it's not Hammer horror because it's American, but it's basically that same era. And so it was more of the title.
I think you're AIP, American International Pictures, I think.
That's
like the Roger Corman era where like Dick Miller and like Jack Nicholson got to start, like they were in those movies.
Okay.
That's like Roger Corman.
I didn't know Jack Yep, that's exactly who directed The Haunted Palace.
Yeah.
And so I was like starting there because I was looking on Tubi for some gothic horror. And so I was watching that. And then Black Sunday came up and I was like, oh, you know what? I've always wanted to watch this because I heard also that this is like a pivotal like precursor to folk horror. And it kind of is. There's elements there for sure. And I was looking it up, and even like aside from that, it's like a precursor again. It's not a proper like folk horror, but there's elements, especially the occulty aspect for sure. It's just apparently it's like when I did like review wiki, it didn't like list it as a proper folk horror, but when I look back, when I like looked it up, I'm like, is Black Sunday folk horror? It just says that again, it is kind of like in that genre, but it's like a precursor, I would say. But Tim Burton also like definitely loves Black Sunday. He's like, the imagery from that stuck with me. And even watching it, I was like, Barbara Steele looks so much like Lisa Marie, that, who starred and Sleepy Hollow is known to like, some of the imagery from that, especially with like the Iron Maiden, which you mentioned.
Right.
Definitely. And just, okay. So yeah, Barbara Steele reminds me of Lisa Marie, reminds me so much. Her haircut, especially in this, I kept seeing Lydia Dietz. I was like, that she totally looks like Winona Ryder mixed with like maybe Lisa Marie or something to me.
Right.
But
is
she's gorgeous.
Lisa Marie the really tall one that played?
Lean.
Yeah, she played Vampira in the Ed Wood movie, right?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
She did. And then she also played Ichabod's mom. So that's funny that she was the one that got Iron Maidened by the father. So sorry, we're going all up, but that's also another great gothic horror. Basically, this is all stemming from if you're, coming off of like Nosferatu, like mania, and you're like trying to like look at some other gothic horror and stuff. But yeah, so Lisa Marie was that the mother in Sleepy Hollow that got.
I still need to see that. I haven't seen it yet. I know
it's so pretty.
Carissa put that on her list of like the Halloween season movies we did, but I haven't watched it yet.
God.
So I need to see that.
It's 2025. There's New Year's coming, so we definitely have time. Yeah, she gets. So I guess I spoiled it for you. That like, yeah, but he used imagery basically based off of Black Sunday and other aspects. But primarily like the whole like Devil's Mask that they put. Oh, and also this is in Italian, or it's another title is the Devil's Mask or something along those lines. I think is what Yeah.
Yeah, the Mask of Satan or something.
The Mask of
I think.
Satan.
Yeah.
That's what it is. So yeah, there is like this whole rabbit hole I went down. Sorry to I don't know. I'm a nerd for like these little like things like connecting the dots and stuff. But and it's funny because with the Haunted Palace, it really does mirror some of the storytelling because you literally have Vincent Price playing the warlock at the beginning of the scene where you watch this guy in the 17th century, the 1600s, who's a warlock, get burned at the stake and call out vengeance to everybody.
Yeah.
And then you come to like Victorian era. I guess where are they? I'm trying to remember if it was Scotland. I don't remember. But
Yeah,
he inherits this castle. And well, so this is again like a haunted palace. You probably haven't, I don't know if you've seen it. It seems kind of obscure. I was surprised to run into it. But like basically he to exact his revenge, he has to inhabit his reincarnation's body, very much like in Black Sunday. So I was like, oh, this is so funny that I happened to watch that first and then I came upon Black Sunday. So it makes sense that it did that. But again, it was like the fact that it was gothic horror and I don't know, I just wanted more from Nosferatu. And I think there's aspects of all of these, well, both of these other two films, Black Sunday and The Haunted Palace, that have more of like, I don't know, more references or more overt like explanation about the occult implications or like, that I wanted more of like that. I don't know if esoteric's the right word, but like this ancient arcane like thing. And so I think that he touched on it in Nosferatu, but it was very, I don't know, it just like wasn't quite as deep as I wanted it, which I'm sure he did do that work himself off screen. And like Ian said, that's something that he would just on his own accord as a fan look deeper into. Like, for example, the 7-pointed star, like blah, 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 what, probably Eggers looked up to create that because as far as I'm aware, he created this particular 7-pointed sigil for Orlok. So that's something I can do on my own for sure. But yeah, I just wanted some more gothic horror and to be like, wait, do I really? Are people like, oh, this is gothic horror? And I was like, I don't know. I mean, there are definitely a difference because these films or Black Sunday we're about to talk about, it's like it was considered like high violence and gruesome for its time. Absolutely. Yeah. But there is a difference between the explicitness that you see in Nosferatu as a modern day, for
sure. Yeah. Well, I'll comment on Nosferatu real quick that I agree. I think Chris and I felt a similar way where in my kind of take on it was hard for me to articulate. It's like, I feel like I expected more from it, but yet at the same time, I couldn't tell you what more I would have wanted. Like if you were to turn the tables on me and be like, all right, well, what would you do differently? I'd be like, I don't know. I think he did pretty well. I do think that because I went in that week, I rewatched the F.W. Murnau one, the original one, which I hadn't seen in probably 15 years. And I also watched for the first time the Werner Herzog one from the 70s.
I want to watch that one.
Klaus Kinski.
Nice.
Of the three, like Eggers is the best one for me by far.
Okay.
Like, and yeah, we can go and say like, oh, but the original German expressionist and it's iconic and it changed. And it did all those things. It changed the game. There wouldn't be a Tim Burton or a Robert Eggers without a Nosferatu. Like there wouldn't be a lot of people without that film. But the new one's the best one, and it follows the story pretty. Like watching all three movies the same week, I'm like, oh, they're all following it pretty closely. Eggers gives the I always forget her name. Is it Lily or Mary? Whoever Lily Rose Death. Whatever her
Ellen.
Ellen
Hutter. I know because I always want to say Helen or Ellen, and yeah.
Totally. He does like they do a lot more with her. Like it's interesting to look at the other movies and be like, oh, they kind of like it almost seems a little less important, and he makes her a lot more important. Granted, she's almost the
MacGuffin in the other thought. Like I don't know if this is a weird take, but based on the way you were talking about it just now, she's almost like the MacGuffin in the other films versus in Eggers, she is a character with more agency.
Yeah,
somewhat.
exactly. More agency for sure. But yeah, and somehow it just had this layer, the sheath of like mainstream on it, even though it's still his vision. And how to quantify, like, I don't know. I don't really think of anything in terms of like gothic horror. At least for me, that's obviously just me. But I know, like, all right, you bring up Hammer, like for sure, gothic horror, like Frankenstein for sure, gothic horror, like Black Sunday, gothic horror. But where
I think that's a good point you make, actually,
Yeah.
because when it comes down to it, the only thing that really makes a gothic horror is a sense of like ancient ruins, and that could be a castle or an old house. So really, I mean, the era, if it takes place in the Victorian era, that's a huge, which I think all three of these films, Nosferatu, Haunted Palace that I mentioned, and this particular Black Sunday, they do end up taking place in kind of a more, or at least, I believe they come back to the 1800s. I should probably review that, but yeah, those are the main things.
Yeah,
not really. It's just setting wise, really.
Yeah, that makes sense. Because I'm just like, I don't know where the line even is. I just assume it's that era, which. Yeah, but I mean, I would watch Black Sunday again before I would watch the new Nosferatu. If I'm being honest, I think that opening scene, I mean, let's dig into it. And I'll bring this up first. I'm glad that you brought up the Hammer horror films, because I was going to say, I mean, this is the second time I've watched Black Sunday, but it's interesting. And this is part of what makes Mario Bava cool. And I think why I'm drawn to him is I feel like, and I'm sure there's other filmmakers that were of a similar mindset, but it feels like he bridges that gap between what was hip then, but also the modern. Like there's aspects of it where I'm watching this movie and I'm like, man, this opening scene is like pretty cool and hardcore.
It's so cool.
And you're not going to get that in an American film. Yeah, like you're not going to get that in a Universal movie. And there's certain effects and aesthetics that remind me of like a Terrence Fisher Hammer movie. Like I've only seen a few of them. But even if we're just like, we can even, let's just say Horror of Dracula and Frankenstein, there's special effects and aspects that remind me of that. And I think it's so interesting, but then it's in black and white, whereas Hammer was like, yo, we're doing this shit in color. We're going to have red blood. We're going to see this in color that we haven't seen before. But this almost merges those two worlds. It feels like a little bit, 1930s, 40s Universal with some like Hammer horror, but then but with the Mario Bava like Italian sensibility, and I've been really into you ask Carissa like the last year, like really into watching like a lot of giallo and Italian films and all that. I'm like really like in that and trying to see more all the time. So I feel like I've become a little tuned to it.
This particular film it's noted, at least on Wikipedia, to be again like a precursor for spaghetti western, because it's Italian. The type of violence, at least the level of violence you'll see in spaghetti westerns and giallo, actually. So I thought that was really cool too. That was another aspect of it that was like, okay, this sounds like a landmark film to watch, at least, and like certain aspects of horror. The only other aspect about gothic horror that I guess real quick I'll touch on is like, other than the place of it being like a haunted house or old ruins or being haunted by the past, is that that there's more like, I guess, taboo subject matter, but I feel like all horror is open to that. I don't think that's like an exclusive. I mean, it doesn't have to be exclusively, but I think horror in general is just about
and
is taboo. So
and it's like how far you can push it just depends on. I think so much is like the country and that film industry, right? Like, I mean, I don't know. I'm trying to think like what was. I guess we're in 1960 now as of this movie, but let's just, if I think back to like Frankenstein, which I want to say was 39, like the James Wales one, it's like they cut out the parts of Dr. Frankenstein talking about, now I know what it feels like to be God and I am the same. And like they cut that because that's like super taboo, right? But I think even if this movie is obviously having like some pretty taboo subject matter, but even in 1939, I feel like because it's not America, like they probably would have been super down to tackle the same exact kind of story, I guess, because they're very deep into, again, like the opening scene, like, oh, she's the witch and we have her tied to the stake and there's curses.
Yeah,
and
no, but
we're
it's
going to
so
put this iron mask on you and burn you alive. And
it was like hardcore. Brutal.
Yeah,
it's a
really
brutal
hardcore.
Opening scene. It immediately grabbed me. And I think like I even like, It immediately grabbed me. And I think after I watched that opening scene and, I was like, okay, I think I'm going to like see if Ian wants to watch this with me. So I was like, okay, this is already like just like what I came here for, basically. I mean, yes, not to out myself as like, oh, like, I like to watch torture or brutal stuff, but it was just like immediately you're like drawn in with the brother, like saying he castigates or casts his sister aside. He's the prince who, is basically ordering her and her lover. Yeah, his name is interesting to pronounce, but basically, he is condemning her to death and her soul to rotten hell or whatever.
Right.
And it's like insane the way that it goes down. You're just like, whoa, this is a black and white movie. What? And like the set, I love the set. It's so simple, but it's so effective. Like it probably could have been just like a black set, a black box like stage studio, and then they just have like a few key pieces of like you have the extras or whatever, and then you have like a few trees or and torches and stuff, and then you have the like I guess it would be the gallows that she's like attached to or
Right.
tied to and everything, and just like her being tied prone or like facing towards it with her back out, and then they brand her, and I mean, it's just like, whoa, this is like no joke. And then that mask, which devil or mask of Satan, that they like, the guy takes this huge hammer, and her brother is the one that like does the movement for like it. And I was confused because I didn't even think about that, like how they would have to actually make it like affixed to her face. I thought just putting it up to her face would be, maybe the spikes are pointy enough that it would just like impale her
Just
face.
grip,
but no,
they
but no,
it on there.
they have a huge ass like Thor's hammer executioner with the black mask, shirtless.
Yeah.
Take the hammer and just like pound it into her face. And and then that's where we see them burn her at the stake with this mask of Satan and her guy, who something. I don't even know.
Like
he's just like her
Udovich or something like that.
Udovich.
Is it Kruva? No, that's the doctor.
That's the doctor. Yeah, you're Udovich. You were right.
Something like that.
Uvatish. But I think they say it like Udovich. Yeah.
I mean, and I will say, like, there are parts of it for me where it does get a little bit slow at times, but I did watch it kind of late. But I mean, it'll probably be a yearly watch for me because I think I can appreciate those aspects of it. And again, from a filmmaking, directing standpoint, it's like there's something like, it's this great black and white cinematography. The settings are always great in his movies.
Oh my gosh.
But there's moments where, again, I talk about kind of bridging the gap, right? Where it's like, there's moments where the staging and the blocking seem still like stagey. Like, all right, we're in this wide shot and you guys are just going to talk there and deliver information. But then the camera will move in a really interesting or dynamic way. And it doesn't feel like it's for the sake of happening. Like it all, when you're watching it makes sense and it flows. And I love that because it's like, all right, here's someone who's like using the camera in a dynamic way that's kind of separating it from the old school. And, all the camera moves are super slick, super effective. And there's one in particular that really stood out to me when the father dude gets killed. I'm already forgetting what happens. But they come in.
Yeah, it's a little convoluted. There's a lot. Like Udovic basically is able to sneak his way in there by getting the two doctors. So in between, like right after we see this execution scene, there's two doctors on their way to like a conference through Moldova.
2 centuries later now. It's 200
so it
years
is
later.
1830. In fact, it is right approaching the Victorian era, basically. And so Moldova, I looked it up. It was like basically right by Wallachia, the Carpathian Mountains. It's right what becomes the Carpathian Mountains, I believe, is the Carpathian Mountains that we see in Nosferatu. Hutter has to like traverse. So they accidentally come upon these ruins when their carriage wheel pops off. And I really like that carriage driver. He is hilarious. And he was like terrified. And you see him with his like whole ass bottle of vodka. It was hard to see because I had to rewind it. Ian actually had to point it out. And then later when he's fixing the wheel, he has like a huge ass flask of vodka.
Yeah.
And it's really funny. But so you were saying, yeah, so basically the doctor, there's two of them. One's like a more elder doctor that seems to know about this like kind of occulty knowledge.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, there's a lot of shenanigans that happen in order for basically the lover guy of Asa, Princess Asa, Barbara Steele's character, who's also like they're like vampire witches, or they're like kind of witch vampires. I don't know. They call them a little bit of both.
Yeah, I mean, she does look into this dude's eyes and like possess him, right? Possesses the doctor dude. So now I think he's the one who killed the father.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah,
he does get in there, and yeah.
But when they find the father dead, like in the kind of last act of the movie, it's super slick because if I remember correctly, let me see, Barbara Steele. So she's playing like the witch that is trying to come back to life, but she's also playing the current princess.
Gotcha.
It's like the same, the same actress. So brother finds dead father. She runs in and then she screams and the camera tilts down because the father's like on the bed with his head like over the mattress. But as the camera tilts down, it rotates upside down super fast. So like his head is right side up. It was just such an interesting, like dynamic, crazy shot that kind of happens that you just wouldn't expect from a movie of this era. And even thinking about it, I'm like, man, how'd you guys like rig that to happen like that? Because the camera literally does this, right? Like, so it tilts down, but as it goes, it turns this way. Like, so it's right side up. It's just such a crazy, cool move. And it's kind of flashy, but again, for me, I'm like, oh, this works though.
It's flashy. I could totally hear like, I don't know if it would be horns or what, like dun dun dun, like I don't know. Like
I'm sure there was some kind of sound design there.
Yes.
But and I mean, there's some great effects in this one too. Like, you know, the dude cuts himself and gets blood on her coffin or whatever, and that's what kind of brings her to life. And there's this crazy shot of the eye, like she looks pretty much intact, and they comment like, wow, 200 years and she looks like she's preserved. But there's this effect where as she's kind of regenerating, you see the eyeballs kind of regenerate.
That was really cool.
It looks super, like I assume they put something on whatever that material was to dissolve it, and they just played it backwards, I would guess. But that was amazing.
There's a lot of really cool effects. Yeah.
Yeah, like they kill someone. I think this was like the father. Does he become a zombie or something? But they throw him in a fire. They throw someone into a fire while they're alive, and they're burning alive. And there's a close up of the head. And it had to be animatronic.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
I was like, what?
Yeah. It's like an animatronic head. Mind you, this is 90 because the mouth and everything's moving, like the eyes, everything's articulating, but you're just seeing it like burn up. And it's such a
almost
pretty gory for that time.
It was so gory. Era. Honestly, I feel like whenever I've seen a movie that depicts somebody getting burned alive, I always expect it to look what that looked like.
Right.
Basically, I expect to see that, but half the time, or most of the time, it's like or like, you know, it's off screen happening, or, you know, you'll cut at the right moments to like not make it so gruesome. But that was like, I was like, what? And I literally said to Ian, I was like, the effects are incredible.
Yeah. And again, like, correct me if I'm wrong in the comments on the Drinks in the Movie Instagram, everybody. But I mean, you tell me, is there an American horror movie in this era, like 1960 or earlier, that portrays gore like that? I don't know that there is. I feel like I would know, but I don't think so in that time frame, at least. And even the special effect, like, I don't know how they do this, where the witch is trying to get the life from the princess, right? So she like holds her, and there's this great like makeup transformation. They do this twice in the movie, where all of a sudden it looks like her face ages, and there's this like dark shading on her face.
It's so good,
but it's so seamless. Like, it's incredibly seamless. Like I rewound it. I rewinded it a couple times, and I'm like, how the fuck did they do this? Because if you think, say, let's take like the Wolfman, you know, Universal's the Wolfman, for example.
You can,
even movies that came up to that point.
Even, after that point, honestly.
Yeah, even after that, like between there and 1960, it's like, to do that effect, it was normally the person had to be like super still, and then they shot a few seconds, they added makeup, they shot more. So it's like a time lapse, and then they just kind of cross dissolve, the footage so that it appears smooth, but you can tell it's a series of cross dissolves.
See the minor,
yeah, exactly. But
it almost looks like stop motion or something.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Yeah, it basically is. Yeah.
Yeah. And this, because she's moving around and you're seeing her face change. And I don't know how they did that. I almost want to message, a makeup person I had on the show a while back and ask them yo,
how do you think they did this?
Like, how did they do that? Like, you must know.
Honestly, you should, because this is that is some movie magic right there.
Yeah. Yes. Definitely movie magic.
Yeah. I was very impressed with that. And of course, yeah, when they revert her back to her normal state, the young princess Katya, she de-ages, so they have to go and do that again, and very seamless again on that. So yeah, really cool. And even when we were watching it, Ian was like, "Wait, how did she turn back?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's because when they burned the original witch Asa at the stake, the spell was broken, basically. Luckily, and I guess her cross does save her technically from being fully consumed by."
Yeah, I guess so. Well, and that's actually a good moment at the end there where the guy is about to kill her, and then he sees it. Like, he sees the necklace.
Doppelganger thing. Yeah.
And luckily, that kind of
he remembered.
Like, that's weird. Yeah.
He remembered her crucifix on her beautiful decolletage a few scenes before, like a earlier in the film. He sees that, which is such a beautiful shot of Barbara Steele. Oh my God. I'm like, gothic beauty, realness, and like sexy. I was like, whoa.
They always, man, I don't know how they pull it off. It's like with hard light. Back in the day, it's always like a spotlight on the face, and somehow the shadows,
like Morticia.
The shadows are always perfect. It always has this glamorous look to it. They were really awesome back then, the way they just lit everything. But it's kind of funny to me how in the end it's this classic kind of mobs with pitchforks and torches just kind of roll
I
in
wanted that
and take her away. Like,
they just on cue.
Yeah, and then meanwhile they're just, oh cool, I guess we saved the day.
There were certain things like that came up in the film for me that were kind of like, oh, that's convenient. Like, I love it, but I kind of loved that. So I guess I will say probably the thing that worked best in the favor of these films, Black Sunday, The Haunted Palace, and even watching the original Moreau Nosferatu 1922, is that I didn't exactly have these this idea and like this high expectation that I painted. Whereas with Nosferatu 2024, I definitely did. All the teaser stuff coming out, and I guess like somebody had said I read on a Reddit thread, they said that they didn't watch any trailers on purpose, and they were happy they didn't do that because it just made it so that I don't know, everything was more fresh and everything. But so basically, oh no, I lost my train of thought. I went too many removed. But so I just know that, the expectations were huge. So I didn't know what to expect fully for this. And that really made a big difference, I think. So there was aspects that were, like had a fun campiness that I loved, though. I was like, oh, this makes me happy,
Yeah,
and
for
so
sure.
To be fair, I was like, well, Nosferatu 2024 didn't scare me at all. I'm like, what's up with that? It was more of like a lot of disgust and apprehension, but I never felt scared, but maybe it wasn't meant to. And I mean, I can't say no, it was a little bit like grip your seat when like they take the mask of Satan to her face, like there were, I will say there were moments like that for this one. But yeah, like having, those expectations really made a big difference. So with these, it was just more like I was along for the ride and having fun with it, I guess. So there is that in the favor of these that were not for Nosferatu. I don't know why I was like making Nosferatu my child that had to do what I didn't do as a, like, I mean, I just was like so excited for there to be a modern gothic horror film. I think that I don't know what I expected, but
yeah. I mean, I think, talking to Nosferatu, I think he delivered in that way. Like his atmosphere and his vibe is great, but I do agree. Like, it also didn't scare me. And Chris and I were also talking about how like I found it kind of odd that it seemed like he really leaned on jump scares in this one.
He did. I was
Like a
literally
lot of
saying
jump
that.
scares, and usually I'm super susceptible to that shit. But somehow none of them worked on me. And
Me too. I think they were ill-timed a bit. They were too many and they were not executed that well. I will say that because I am too. If it's the tension is brought up right, I think that there wasn't enough tension. I don't know. I think there was a lack of tension. That's funny that you say that because some people were being so like hoity-toity, like, oh, people just don't get gothic horror and they rely on horror that's all about jump scares. And I'm like thinking, what the heck? You're literally Nosferatu was pretty much any sort of scare or anything was an attempt at jump scares. I feel like most. So okay, I'm not crazy. Those posts would made me feel a little like I was like, oh, am I wrong?
Yeah.
No. But yeah.
And it almost had me thinking, like, I wonder if there's not really a way to take that era, like to make a gothic horror movie now that will be any scarier than anything done before. Because I think if anyone was going to deliver that, it would have been Robert Eggers.
Yeah, true.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know. And maybe it'll be more appreciated as time goes on when those, I guess, expectations are subsided. Like maybe in a few years, it's like we'll all watch it and be like, this is a pretty damn good movie.
Yeah.
Just because I think, funny enough, it's like I think this is what happens when your first movie is so good. Like The Witch is exceptional.
Yes.
I haven't seen it since, but I think I don't even think this has to be a fact, right? Like everybody went into this movie like, oh man, like it's gonna be like The Witch. But Nosferatu, like it's got to be super creepy, super scary. Like I think everyone was going in with that. That's my initial thought. Like even if you never saw the trailer or anything, like your mind is for sure going there because that's his biggest thing. That's what he's known for, right? Like, yeah. I mean, I think it works. Just not as scary as I know I thought it would be and all that. I thought it was going to be like some next level, like super scary shit, and it wasn't.
Yeah, I don't know what it was. Like, I think, and I was also surprised by how early on they showed him like in his full form. So, but that's the thing, like when you're doing creature type stuff and even like any vampire film, you don't really always, like oftentimes you don't keep them in the dark. Like,
I felt that way too. But then like going back and watching the other two movies, it's like, oh yeah, he's in it like immediately as soon as Thomas gets to the castle to sell him the fucking house because it's a real estate movie.
I know. I posted that. It was like, oh, the more above all, Nosferatu is a cautionary tale about the dangers of real estate, and I was like, yes, I will repost that. No, I mean, but bringing it back to Black Sunday, like, I mean, again, this is all a rabbit hole that I went down. So it's fair enough. Like, I think that I was just, I craved something that felt nostalgic and had those kind of campy moments. So like a case in point, when they, the two doctors that are on their way to the convention and have, are trying to like, just, I guess, explore to see if there's someone to call on for help for their carriage, stumble into that like, kind of abandoned ruined church and the catacomb or the crypts where Asa is. There's just that perfect like chain of events where he just happened to, there's that really cool what do you call it? It's a Cross of Lorraine. I love that they specifically had this like Cyrillic Cross of Lorraine above her coffin, which had a glass over her face, so that way as a witch with her mask of Satan could stare at the cross and always like be hindered by it.
That's right. Yeah.
I just love the series of events that he just happens to destroy the cross on accident, the elder doctor that seemed to know about this arcane stuff, and then that cross breaks the freaking glass. And he's just like, oh, weird. Oh, and like, oh, strange. Right. Let me just take this off, even though I'm like, what are you doing? I loved it, but I also really loved it. I loved being able to yell at the screen baby, like, what are you doing? You're like an occulty doctor. You know all this stuff. What do you think? Even if you don't really, if you're like totally agnostic or even atheist and you don't think anything's going to happen, what do you think's going to happen? It's just like it's also just desecrating a corpse if you take off the mask. And he like goes in and removes the mask, and all these convenient things happen, and then he conveniently cuts himself on the glass, and conveniently his blood drops onto her face, into her mouth. And it's just like I loved the convenience of it, which if it were a Robert Eggers film, I'd probably be like, oh, that's convenient. Oops. If it was his film, I'd be like, oh, well, that's real convenient. But in watching this, I'm like, oh, that's so cute.
Yeah, it's a little more like, acceptable, the contrivances and all that.
Exactly. And I enjoyed it for that. But yeah, it's just like the tone of it. It's a weird thing how just, again, your expectations and what you want and like, yeah, it totally altered everything for me. So again, I'm being fully just, honest here that yes, if it were one director, I'd be like, what the heck? Like, get it together. But in this case, I'm like, that's so fun and delightful and just silly and enjoyable to watch for some reason. So yeah, there was a couple of those things that I enjoyed. And it made me happy that at the end, the love interest guy, he realized who that Katya with the cross, the one that looked aged, looked like the witch, was actually the real Katya and not Asa. That made me happy. And so there's probably like a sense of like poetic justice or like, a closure that felt good. Whereas I'm sure with Nosferatu, there's like, it wasn't the happiest ending, which I mean, I'm okay with it not being a happy ending, but I guess like making sure there's like, feels like less of a pointlessness to it. Right. I mean, like I think there's a lot to be said about, again, when it comes to that, like the whole thing, that's a whole other discussion, but there's just this whole thing about like, especially for women, but for anybody, like if a vampire is disgusting, we're like, oh, I don't get it. And we go in hoping for, Gary Oldman, Bram Stoker's Dracula, where at least he looks half the time like, and it can get into really slippery discussions of like, oh, so, some people are like, oh, so it's okay if he is making passes if he's a good looking guy. And it's like, no, that's not the case. But it's easier just to suspend our disbelief when, the guy can have his more humanoid look and his more beast look, like in Bram Stoker's Dracula. So I think that's a problem where I was like, he really just looks so disgusting in Nosferatu. But anyway, so again, but that's the horror of it, I guess, is being hypnotized to be at his will.
Yeah. Well, I don't know that I have anything else to really add to Black Sunday. I mean, for me, I think it's definitely worth watching if you're someone that's into gothic horror, as you mentioned. If you're someone that's maybe into Hammer or into Universal, or you want to start exploring that direction, I think this is a good one to watch. Like I said, I feel like it kind of fills a void in that arena of films from that time frame. Or
seeing where Tim Burton got a lot of inspiration from. That's a good one. And if you like Giallo as well, apparently this is a predecessor to that, as well as spaghetti westerns. And if you're just like me and you're like, I want to go down and honestly, I wouldn't be surprised if Eggers like was aware of this. Well, no, he probably definitely is. He probably like,
for
those
sure.
parts I watched that I was like, okay, he did a good job. Like, paying tribute to and homage to this genre, like the beautiful, like scenic scapes of ruins and the environment. Like I will say, yeah, definitely. So if you are just like had blue balls from watching Nosferatu, like I did, and you're like, I'm trying to find something that does something. Like, look into this. I'm not saying, and again, fully honest, like it's probably because my expectations were way too high for Nosferatu. This does not exactly terrify you make or anything, but it, I don't know. It has a sense of nostalgia in it that I think I will allow and forgive any lacking in those areas, I guess. I don't know.
Damn. All right. Yeah, I think that's it for Black Sunday. I want to ask real quick though before we end this. So, I mean, what are some of your favorite horror films? Like, what do you put up there as like your kind of your favorites? I'm just curious.
Yeah. So yes, I feel like I've thought of this question before, and it's a hard one, but I definitely will. I feel like I will put The Shining up there. I will put Planet Terror up there because that's very me. even though I'm not saying it's a critically acclaimed horror. Psycho is up there, the original. And then again, I would say that, I do love Bram Stoker's Dracula, which is like a gothic horror film, but I would say, I mean, it's funny because I'm like, is it though? It feels more like a dark fantasy, but there are pretty scary parts in that. Like I got
I still haven't
terrified.
seen that.
Yeah,
I
it's
need
a
to
good
watch that.
one. Some of the creature can be, yeah, especially again when Gary Oldman's more of his like bat werewolf looking creature thing. That terrified me as a kid, especially. And then I grew up really loving I have a love-hate relationship with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. So
Okay.
my dad thought it was really funny to play that for Thanksgiving.
Really?
Turkey
Nice.
card. Yeah, he had a dark sense of humor like that. And then grew up. I do love the Halloween franchise. That's probably like my main like slasher franchise that I grew up on.
Yep, same.
Yeah. So it's funny because my gateway to that was Halloween H2O, which I definitely told an elder Halloween fan, and I could tell they were just like, really? And I was like, yeah, but the thing is, like, I went from that and I went back and I watched all of them properly, and the original Halloween is the best.
Yeah, that's the key
That's the
word is gateway.
thing.
Gateway,
Yeah.
keyword. I mean, I'll say it outright, and I've said this in a podcast in the past. I think H2O is one of the better ones of the
Yeah.
franchise for sure.
Heck yeah. Thank
Like
you.
I stand by it. That was the first one I saw too.
I need to revisit it. I used to watch it a lot as a kid, so
Yeah.
it'll be weird, but I haven't watched it as an adult.
It's
So.
good. It's only like an hour and 20 minutes. It
Heck
doesn't even hit the
yes.
90-minute mark.
Bring
Like
back like
it's fast. It feels
the hour and
fast.
a half,
It
hour
moves
20.
quick. Yeah. It's a quick movie, but yeah, I throw that one up there. I think I said this before, but I'll say this for the audience too. If you're gonna continue with like the Bava route, my next suggestions. So one of the movies of his I've seen, Blood and Black Lace, is my favorite one by far. That one is that's like Giallo all the way. Has the coolest opening credits and like some of the dopest cinematography ever. I dream to one day be such a hip director that I can do the same opening credits. Just because I think it's so fucking cool. And then I think I already said this too is Bay of Blood. If you're into the slasher stuff, because I think the slasher genre definitely owes a lot to that movie. I feel like it's a predecessor to all those movies, and Friday the 13th Part 2 like quite literally ripped a lot of shit off from it. Like almost, it's been a minute since I've seen Part 2, but like very closely. Like the exact same kills, the same kind of order of operation for part of the movie, because Bay of Blood almost feels like it's two movies in one. Like it's one kind of situation, then all of a sudden it's like, oh, who are all these like teenagers that are dancing around the woods and just kind of going into this cabin now? And then all of a sudden they're getting whacked. Like,
yeah,
it's
I
an
love
interesting
films like
one.
that are like two genres in one almost. Like one just
Yeah. And it all ties in and has like a really bonkers ending. Like I remember watching it for the first time at my girlfriend's place, at Sally's place, and she came back from work and it was like the last 30 minutes of the movie and the ending happened and she just laughed. She's just like, what the fuck? Like
amazing.
But
Love
yeah,
that. That's so
I'll
good.
leave it at that.
I remembered another favorite horror film that might top a lot of not top a lot of these, but I just have to put it in there is The Evil Dead, like Evil Dead 2 especially.
Okay.
Yeah. I mean, Army of Darkness is up there, but I really love like Evil Dead 2. I actually really liked the remake too, but go on.
No,
Sorry.
I think the remake's good.
Yeah.
I throw the
I made
remake up
Ian
there.
watch it.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
Yeah,
man.
because he did not want to.
Want to do it?
Well, he's a fan of he's the reason why I got into Evil Dead 2 and Army of Darkness. And so he was like, yeah. And I like showed him the opening was pretty good. And I think I showed it to him without really saying what it was from.
Nice.
Like, then now you want to watch it, right?
Yeah, no, I put the Evil Dead remake in the pantheon of like actual good remakes. I think it's a well done movie.
I agree.
Yeah, and I feel like I'm in the minority of I actually like the original Evil Dead more than Evil Dead 2.
Okay.
Because I don't get me wrong, like I love Evil Dead 2 and I appreciate the humor and all that, but I like when it was still just like when they were straight shooting in the first movie, you know?
I think for me, I kind of like conflate the two. So I mean, a lot of the one I remember liking did feel a little bit more like they were trying to be more real horror, and then like it was just funny for that reason. But is that where she does the claymation dance, or was that in both?
That's part two.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's when they leaned into it. Okay, gotcha.
Yeah. That's when he would just like, well, I'm gonna do my Three Stooges thing. Because they were really deep into like slapstick comedy and all that, like Sam Raimi and the crew,
Bruce
the
Campbell,
friends,
and then his brother, I think.
Yeah, Ted Raimi is in all of them. And
yeah. Oh, Shaun of the Dead's pretty great too.
Yeah,
But
Shaun
I feel
of
like
the Dead's a banger.
I feel like he was very inspired by some of his shooting style, Sam Raimi's shooting style. Edgar Wright, yeah.
Yeah, and Edgar Wright he's got a distinct kind of vibe on his own too, especially just his editing alone. Like the way he edits shit and creates transitions and all that is just super cool. His next movie is going to be Running Man, which should be interesting.
Okay.
And it's already in production. So, you know, like the Stephen King book, and there was a movie with Arnold Schwarzenegger back in the day, The Running Man. So he's doing
I'm not
that.
familiar. Ooh, okay.
Yeah, I've heard though that because I don't read Stephen King, so I've heard that the Running Man movie is like quite a bit different than the book, and that Edgar Wright's movie is going to be like a more like a better adaptation. Yeah, a more true adaptation.
Okay,
but should be interesting.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the movie.
Soho was great.
Okay, I need to watch that. The Last Night in Soho. Is that a horror, or is that like more just? Is that? Like
it's like action? Horror. It's horror. Maybe like it's got some of that Giallo influence though, for sure. You know.
Yeah, it looked really cool. It looked really cool. It doesn't have to be horror for me to like it. Like,
yeah, no, it's awesome. Like I can't see anyone not liking that movie. I think it's his masterpiece. I mean, of course, there's Shaun of the Dead for sure.
Yeah.
But for me,
and Hot Fuzz.
Yeah. And everyone seems to love Baby Driver. I got to watch that again. I didn't really care for it.
I have not seen it. I've heard of it.
Yeah, everyone raves about it. But I think Last Night in Soho is his his ultimate film so far.
Awesome. Yeah. Thank you for the rec.
Yep. All right. Well, I'm going to go ahead and end this recording. Everybody, thanks for listening. Go check out Black Sunday. I've got a DVD, but where'd you see it? Tubi.
And there are ads, but yeah, it's worth it.
It's probably on Amazon Prime too. Check Amazon Prime because Amazon Prime usually has a lot of these kind of maybe more obscure type movies. But yeah, that's a wrap on this one, everyone. Thanks for listening and go check it out. Cheers.
Cheers, boy.
Thank you for listening to the Drinks and a Movie podcast. You can now find us on Instagram at Drinks and a Movie Pod, where we'll be posting photos from all the various films that we discuss. You can also email us at drinksandamoviepod@gmail.com. Please rate, review, and subscribe, and thank you for listening.